We're now 2 years after the MacBook Air M2 2022 launched, and yet it still sits atop our best laptops buying guide. Have there really been no new laptops that have knocked the latest MacBook Air off the top spot? The fact is, there really hasn't been. The Dell XPS 13 used to be the MacBook Air's chief rival, but the last few models haven't been able to match the performance and value for money that the MacBook Air manages. Lenovo and HP have also not quite managed to match what Apple has achieved with the MacBook Air M2 2022. Apple MacBook Air M2 2022 at Amazon for $749. In fact, Apple's biggest competitor when it comes to the M2 MacBook Air is Apple. And so far, it's not released a worthy successor, though it has come close. In 2023, it launched a new 15-inch model of the MacBook Air, which brings a lot of what we loved about the 13-inch model that I review here, but in a bigger body. It's a great choice for people who like the idea of the MacBook Air with M2, but who want a larger display. However, I personally prefer the original 13-inch MacBook Air M2 2022, as in my mind, the MacBook Air lineup is all about being thin, light and portable, and the 15-inch model sacrifices some of that for the larger screen. The larger model is more expensive, while the MacBook Air M2 2022 has had a noticeable price drop since its launch, making it even better value for money. Also, even though Apple has released its M3 chip, alongside new MacBook Pros powered by the chip, the company hasn't yet unveiled an M3 MacBook Air. Once it has, there's a good chance that it could finally replace the M2 model as the best laptop you can buy. Until then, the MacBook Air M2 2022 remains Apple's latest and greatest thin and light laptop. While writing this MacBook Air M2 2022 review, I was struck by a thought. What if Apple had actually originally planned for this to have been a redesigned MacBook Pro 13-inch with an M2 chip? It sort of makes sense, as the new MacBook Air has a larger screen, better speakers and a 1080p webcam, compared to the MacBook Pro 13-inch M2 2022 that we actually got. The M2 chip in both laptops offer very similar performance, and unlike what many people had hoped for, the new MacBook Air doesn't come in a range of pastel colors, like the 24-inch iMac, but instead a limited amount of rather professional-looking hues. Finally, the MacBook Air M2 2022 launched with a much higher price tag of $1,199, £1,249/1,899 Australian dollars, which is a price we'd expect with a MacBook Pro, rather than the entry-level MacBook Air. However, at WWDC 2023, Apple announced the new 15-inch MacBook Air with the Apple M2 while simultaneously cutting the price of the MacBook Air by $100, bringing the price to $1,099, £1,149, and making it much better value. Having a redesigned MacBook Pro, alongside a MacBook Air with the same old design, but new M2 chip and cheaper price, would have made a lot of sense, but Apple did the opposite. So, we have a redesigned MacBook Air that's now more expensive, and a MacBook Pro 13-inch with the same old design. I can't help but think this was a bit of a missed opportunity. That's because the Apple MacBook Air M2 2022 has big shoes to fill. Its predecessor, the MacBook Air M1 2020, has been our pick as the best laptop you can buy since its launch 2 years ago. Does the MacBook Air M2 2022 finally knock its predecessor from the top? There's plenty going for it, including a new eye-catching design that increases the screen size while making the entire laptop smaller and lighter, while also upping the webcam resolution to 1080p, as well as some other goodies. The new look follows Apple's reinvention of many of its other iconic products, including the iMac 24-inch and MacBook Pro 16-inch. In fact, the only MacBook to not get a redesign now is the new MacBook Pro 13-inch, M2 2022, as mentioned earlier, which despite having the same new M2 chip, keeps its old look, and therefore feels like a bit of an afterthought. Not so the new MacBook Air M2 2022, however. Along with a new look, it also gets the aforementioned M2 chip. This is the follow-up to the impressive M1 found in the previous MacBook Air. After ditching Intel, Apple now creates its own processor and graphics to power its Macs and MacBooks, and the results have already been spectacular, with excellent performance and industry-leading battery life. As we saw with the new MacBook Pro 13-inch, the M2 chip continues this, with boosted performance and once again long battery life. The good news for the MacBook Air is that it gets the same M2 chip as the more expensive MacBook Pro 13-inch, which allows it to offer almost identical performance. Throw in the new design, which offers a larger and brighter screen than the MacBook Pro 13-inch, and lower price tag, and there's a strong case to make for the MacBook Air M2 2022, making the 13-inch MacBook Pro obsolete. It's not all good news, however, as the new MacBook Air launched with a higher price tag. Starting at $1,199, £1,249, this is a large increase over the MacBook Air M1 2020, which launched at $999/999. This, sadly, means that it lacks the pure value for money that the M1 MacBook Air offered. It seems Apple is aware of that, as unlike other models, which get discontinued once a new version is out, Apple will continue to sell the older MacBook Air, marketing it at people who want a more affordable MacBook. It means that the new MacBook Air isn't such an easy recommendation as the older model, as that's a high price tag for pretty much anybody. So, while we'd recommend anyone who is thinking of buying the MacBook Pro 13-inch to actually get the MacBook Air M2 2022, we can't recommend it to everyone, which is what we did with the previous MacBook Air. That's a bit of a shame. The new MacBook Air was announced at Apple's WWDC 2022 Developer Conference. While the MacBook Pro 13-inch M2 2022 was the first M2-powered Mac to come out, we've had to wait until July to get a solid launch date for the new MacBook Air, possibly due to Apple's uncertainty about component and material availability. The new MacBook Air M2 2022 eventually went on sale on July 8 for order, with deliveries starting on July 15. However, we expect this to be a very popular product, and with current stock issues, delivery dates may be delayed, though hopefully not by too much. This MacBook Air starts at $1,199, £1, $249/AU $1, $899. The M1-based Air will continue to be available for $999, though education users can grab one for a little less at $899. This leap in price is understandable, but it means it feels like poorer value than the older MacBook Air, which is a shame, as one of the best things about the 2020 MacBook Air was its low price and excellent performance. The base model of the MacBook Air M2 2022 comes with an 8-core CPU, 8-core GPU, 8 GB of memory and 256 GB SSD storage. Meanwhile, the new M2 MacBook Pro 13-inch starts at $1,299/£1,999 Australian dollars, which puts Apple in an odd place, as it now means the price of the MacBook Air and MacBook Pro 13-inch aren't that different. While both base models come with the new M2 chip, the cheapest MacBook Air comes with an 8-core GPU, while the MacBook Pro 13-inch's base model comes with an M2 chip with a 10-core GPU, which means the more expensive MacBook has the edge when it comes to graphical performance. But the MacBook Air isn't that far off, as we discuss later. However, at WWDC 2023, Apple announced that it is knocking $100 off the MacBook Air M2 2022. This means this laptop is now a lot better value, and isn't quite as expensive as the M1 MacBook Air.